All right, we are ready to go. So just another few seconds and we'll be live on YouTube and then we can begin. Okay, great. Let's get started. Hi, everybody. This is Ramanuj from LawSikho, and we have been doing these webinars. I hope some of you have been attending these sessions. I'm going to open the chat for everybody. So usually we are quite scared of Zoom bombers. They have been disturbing the sessions repeatedly. So what we do is that we kind of shut off the chats and everything else so that people can't disturb the sessions. But I have opened the chat right now. So anybody who wants to join, please feel free to join. So just a quick brief about LawSikho. We are a legal education company. We offer advanced legal courses for lawyers. We work with law firms. We work with leading companies across India, even outside India, working on their legal training requirements. And we also, of course, work with law students, with some universities, and with lawyers for their advanced training requirements. And do check out lawsikho.com. So let's welcome our today's guest, Arjo Majumdar. Hi, Arjo.
Hi, Ramanuj. Good to see you. It's been a while.
Yes, absolutely. Today, it's a very interesting thing. We often get many people asking about career opportunities in academia, right? And when generally people think of what it is like to be a, a legal academician, they have the images of their own college teachers on mind, and sometimes it's a great inspiring picture, and other times not so inspiring picture, and both are there. But that said, many people genuinely want to work in the legal academia, and to be honest, there was a time when I wanted to be an academician and I wanted to teach. Teaching was something that really inspired me, but I thought that it's better that I build something outside the academia, because I was pretty sure that I won't be allowed to build what I want to build within the boundaries of the academia. And so that's how it goes. And you have been a lawyer first, and then you move to the academia, and that is another interesting thing. It is sometimes said that there are teachers who basically, if you can't do anything else, it's a secure government job. Somehow get into a law college somewhere, and you have a secure career. At least you'll have pension, etc. So in that light, how do you see you joining what informed your decision to join academia?
Right.
What made you move from legal practice?
Right. So that's probably the first question that everybody asks me. That you've been practicing as a lawyer in various law firms. Why the shift to academia? Right. So I actually started my career with economic laws practice way back in 2006. And I was an associate with their Mumbai office as part of their indirect tax team. And then I had the opportunity to go to my LLM abroad, did my LLM. But of course, that was at the cusp of the 2008, 2009 recession. So I came back to India and joined Fox Mandal. Having joined Fox Mandal, then Mr. Som Mandal at the time was gracious enough to send me off, a fairly young associate, to the London office at the time, where I seconded for a good many months. And then I came back to Fox and then continued as an associate and later senior associate at Fox. Eventually shifted, of course, to Desai Devanji, where I was a senior associate looking at cap markets and mergers and acquisitions and private equity. Now, after about 7 years, I decided that it just came to me that, what am I doing, right? For those of us who've worked in law firms or who have interned even in law firms, we know what the job pressure entails, what kind of work-life balance that is there or actually isn't there. And then I then decided that, okay, can I get a better work-life balance without sacrificing too much of money. Let's just if one were to be blunt and honest, let's face it, everybody wants to be a Harvey Specter, primarily because of the money that law brings us, right? Especially corporate law. Now, I decided that I didn't want to do corporate law anymore, at least not just for the money. Yes, it comes with a lot of challenges, and each challenges are exciting and opportunities are exciting and all the test. But I just decided that I want to do something else. I want to spend more time with my family, and I want to spend less time worrying about what's going to happen at work. So that was the primary reason why I shifted from corporate law or corporate law practice to academia.
Right, and you straight away shifted to Jindal, is it, or was it some other organization?
Well, there was a brief period of time when I was doing classes on the side, though. On the side, I mean, this was parallel to while I was working at Fox. I was doing a few classes for this organization called Rainmaker.
Right.
If you remember Rainmaker, and
of course,
older lawyers might remember Rainmaker back in the day.
They were pioneers in our area of work.
Absolutely, absolutely. They were absolute pioneers in this area. And I had the good fortune of working with, industry stalwarts like Sachin Malhan and others. And now I think they've changed to Kahura or something else. But I did a few classes for Rainmaker. But Jindal Global Law School and OP Jindal Global University is my first sort of full-time teaching engagement.
Right. So what did you think? What were you expecting when you were moving to academia? Like, did you think that, were you looking forward to intellectual satisfaction? Were you looking forward to writing? Were you not worried that you'll get into this in academic? Mostly we see that there's very little growth in academia, and of course there's your yearly increments, but if you look at the vast majority of Indian academicians in legal area, there's very little that they have really to look forward to in terms of growth. So did you not worry compared to imagine somebody in a law firm partner, or you are a litigator? The sky is the limit, literally, so to speak. You can build your own law firm. Compared to that, didn't you feel that academia limits your future opportunity?
Well, it does limit your future monetarily, right? But that decision I'd already taken, that money doesn't matter to me anymore. So that really is the key in shifting to academia. And it's a very sad state of affairs, I must tell you, Ramanuj, that when you made that statement that people who can't do anything, they teach, right? What that means?
I mean, it's a saying, it's a proverb.
I know it's a saying. And I know
it's not something I say. I encourage people to teach.
I agree. I agree that it's a proverb. You haven't made it up. It's not yours. But the point is that the very fact that statement exists, what does that tell you about how much we value our teachers or our academics in terms of finances? So people who can't get a job anywhere else, they go and teach. But if that is going to be the case, then you're obviously, nobody wants to teach in terms of if they have to support a family or they have to support themselves. Now, I'm fairly fortunate in the fact that I joined the OP Jindal Global University, which, offers a substantial pay packet, right? But in terms of monetary growth, yes, I agree. Monetary growth isn't as much as a litigator or as a corporate lawyer. But if you take that out of the equation, that I am satisfied with whatever I have.
Right.
If you bring that into your mindset, which came into my mindset, that look, I will be getting enough for a comfortable life. And maybe I will not be able to buy an island in the Bermuda Triangle, or maybe I will not be able to buy my own private jet, but that's okay.
Right. So everybody is not driven by money, right? So there are people who are driven by money, and of course, I think there is potential to make money in academia too, for that matter. But that's a different point. We'll get to that in a bit. But if you look at it this way, that everybody is not driven by money, but there are people who are driven by other factors. So there are people who want, there are few primary things that we identify as, that what are people driven by. In fact, this is something that we work with a lot, because we counsel students every day and lawyers every day, and we have to ask them, what are you driven by? And there are people who are driven by money, but there are other people who are driven by validation or acknowledgement, right? They want acknowledgement. There are other people who are driven by a desire to contribute, right? They're truly service-minded and they want to contribute and connect with other people. Like connection is a major driver for many people. So there are other people who are adventurous, right? They want to do something new, innovation, adventure.
Like yourself.
Sure, I haven't gone on too many adventures recently, but yeah, I mean, business kind of can fulfill that. But yeah, so there are people are driven by other things. So if you can tell us something like that, if you are going to teach, what are the other perks of teaching apart from money?
Sure.
Yeah.
So apart from money, if you leave the money bit aside, there are a number of other things that should drive an academic or a teacher.
No, it's not about should, but let's look at like really what it is like. Like, for example, you may think that a academician should not wield power, but there are academicians which have wielded immense power, right? So
Sure.
In our country, so power, influence could be anything. So what is?
So I can tell you my experiences in the sense that when I shifted from practice to teaching, I very quickly figured out that both of them are pretty much the same. Now let's examine that statement a little bit. Why is practice or law practice pretty much the same as a legal academy?
Yeah, it's a shocking.
It is a shocking statement, right? Okay, bear with me. What is the job of a litigator? Twofold. One is to make their clients available or then make their clients knowledgeable about where the law stands, what you can do and what you can't do. That's one. So of course, the more important aspect of litigation is to defend one's client in court. Now, when you're defending one's client in court, you are creating arguments based on precedent, based on available statutory materials, based on juristic opinion, based on anything that you can get your hands on, basically, and anything that you think would be admissible as part of an argument. Right? So every time you are drafting a new plaint or a new any document that goes into a court, whether it's a plaint, whether it's a response, whether it's a petition, and so on and so forth, right? Now let's look at the corporate side. What is your job? Primarily to, again, teach your clients the law in terms of a memo or an opinion or whatever. And then ensuring that your client has understood what can be done and what cannot be done in terms of what is the good side and the bad side of the law. And then helping the client fulfill his or her aspirations in terms of that transaction. This is what litigators and corporate lawyers do. Now let's apply this to teaching. What is your job as a teacher? To make your students aware of what the law is. I could take it a step further and say that because these are lawyers that are being trained or law students that are being trained to become lawyers, it's not just enough to teach them this is where the law lies and on this side is okay, this side is not okay. But it can't just stop there. You have to ensure that you make them practice enough to start thinking like lawyers. That's one aspect. What is the other aspect? To write. What are you doing when you're writing? You're creating an argument. What are you basing that argument on? You're basing that argument on, like we've mentioned before, precedents, statutory materials, juristic opinion, and anything else that you can lay your hands on. So an opinion or a memo for your client can be turned into a publishable quality paper. There's your research. When you're educating your client on matters of law, aren't you doing pretty much the same thing, albeit with a few changes because students are still in, law school. They're not mature enough in terms of they don't have a large business to run, etc. So aren't you doing the same thing with students? But here lies the difference. And this is where my, how should I put it? The desire came in. When your client comes in and says, I need an opinion on this position of the law, you are now writing, you're researching, and you're writing a paper or an opinion or a memo, whatever you want to call it, on what your client wants, right? So client comes in and says, okay, I need to know, I've got a few Chinese companies and I need to know what are the ramifications of those Chinese companies that I am promoting, of them reinvesting into India, especially post, I think, April 15th or 18th, whenever that new direction came out. You are doing the research that your client wants you to do. As an academic, and this is why I love this job so much, I get to decide what I want to research on. It does not matter whether anyone else thinks that it's valuable or it's useful or not. I get to decide what I want to research on. And that till date has remained the key factor in moving to academia. That freedom of intellectual thought, right? Hopefully that clears up that shocking statement.
That makes sense. Basically, you get to write about any problems and influence. Lawyers pick it up, judges pick it up. It's possible, right? So that's great. If you can throw some light on, what has it been like? What have been some challenges that you've faced being an academician, and what are the have been some cons and apart from the pros? Yeah.
There have been a number of challenges. Primarily, one of them has been, this was a challenge initially when I just moved. The challenge, one of the biggest challenges was that I'm used to, as a lawyer, as a practitioner, I'm used to engaging with my fellow associates, with my partners, with my clients, with even interns, where everybody, barring perhaps interns, everybody is expected to have a minimum understanding of how things work, whether it's business or law or, in terms of specializations, etc. Right? Now, that expectation can't be held for law students. So when I started teaching, I was doing mergers and acquisitions and private equity and cap markets. And when I started teaching at Jindal, I started teaching property law to second-year students. Now, you've been used to talking to people at your own age group, at your own level of understanding. Now you're talking to people who are way younger, who have not yet had the kind of understanding of law that comes in perhaps third, fourth, or maybe even fifth year. And you have to translate complex issues in law into something that a 18 or 19-year-old can understand. That to me was one of the biggest challenges. That's one. Second, the idea that you may not agree with my opinion, but you must agree that I'm entitled to have one. Right? Now, this is a statement that takes on many forms throughout history, that I may not agree with you, but I will defend your right to have an opinion. Right? Because universities and law schools are, I would say, spaces of intellectual thought and discovery, everybody has opinions and everybody is entitled to them. Now, as a junior lawyer, whether you're litigating or whether you are in corporate practice, you may have an opinion. It may not be the same opinion that your managing partner or your senior advocate may have. And therefore your opinion takes lesser precedence or takes a secondary step, right? But in a university or an academic environment, all opinions are created equal and all opinions are respected. Now, that could be a pro as well as a con, because the moment your opinion is respected, you do know that you have to have enough substance to back that opinion up, because then people will engage with you in a discussion as to, okay, you feel a certain way about this development that the government has done, right? This is your opinion. Explain why, right? Which means that now you have to be very careful as to how you frame your opinions. That's another way of saying that when you're opening your mouth, you must be absolutely sure that what you're saying can be backed up, right? And of course, this is something that is taught at all law schools, at all internships, I'm sure.
Correct, but I'm sure the threshold is much lower in a university compared to in a law firm, right? So, but that, I was planning to ask this question a little later, but since we have brought this up, I think it's a good time to ask it. There has been a lot of debate about ideological bends in academia, right? Like whether academia should be, whether academicians should be having ideologies and whether they should be teaching those ideologies, and whether their teaching should should be influenced by the ideologies they have and political positions they have. So, what are your thoughts on that?
No, that's a very, very important question. That's an extremely important question. And, to all the law students who are viewing this, this is something that is actually a little troublesome sometimes. Now, as academics, we are allowed, and as human beings, let's say, to begin with that, we are allowed to have opinions, and we should be allowed to have opinions, right? Whether it's an opinion on politics, whether it's opinion on world, pandemics, it doesn't really matter. But fact of the matter is, as human beings, we're entitled to have opinions. So that is the first part of your question. The second part of your question is, should an academic's politics or an academic's left or right leaning tendencies, should that come into the classroom? Ideally, it should not, especially in a law school, right? Because let's face it, what are we training our law students to do? We are training our law students to look at a problem from multiple perspectives, to look at it from a respondent's perspective, to look at it from a petitioner's perspective, right? Now, if I am going to walk into a classroom and give only one side of the story, to provide only one perspective, then as a law academic, as a law teacher, I have failed.
Sure.
Right? Now, if we are truly training our law students to have a holistic view of things, and that's really what lawyers and judges do, right? Then and I can tell you right now, I'm fairly open with this, I am slightly left of the center, slightly, right? But if I walk into a classroom and then talk about left liberal philosophy only, then I'm doing my students a disservice, right? And which means that I have not completed their training.
Right.
In terms of bringing that into the classroom, sure, bring that in. Bring in what your personal opinions are, but show the other side as well. Audi altem partem, right?
Right. I think that's a very good answer. There's a comment from Pritam Ghosh in the chat, and I think I would like to highlight this. He's saying that, as an academician, it's not necessary that you are restricted to the university, but you can, for example, he's giving his own example that, I am advising a government body and I am also doing other stuff. I'm advising private bodies. So it is possible to do such things as an academician. Can you throw some light on this? Because when you are thinking that, earning potentials are limited, etc., perhaps we are limiting ourselves to the salary of an academician from the university or from the law college. But is there a possibility of them doing other stuff, definitely writing, definitely, policy advisory and other kind of stuff, which is actually still possible? And you can be an influencer, you have the time to research, you can be a thought leader in your area. So what are the opportunities in that, in your experience?
There are huge, I would say there are huge number of opportunities available for academics to pursue, I would say, I wouldn't say careers, but pursue options outside of academia. Like Pritam, I'm just looking at his question as well, his comment as well, that he's advising a top tier law firm. That's absolutely possible, right? But it all depends upon how much time do you have, right? Now, apart from teaching and research, which ought to be the core of every legal academy, right? What else can you do? One, you could start giving guest lectures at other universities, at other law schools, right? Now, I've done that from time to time. It's been hugely beneficial, not just monetarily, but also in terms of experiencing different university spaces, experiencing different kinds of students.
Network and also.
Sorry?
Creating a network also.
Creating a network, of course, right? And of course, there are still students who come back, who have taught many years back, who say, so sir, this is a problem that we're having. How would you advise, right? in the initial years, just after I'd shifted, some of my clients from my erstwhile firms came to me and said, could you help us out on this matter, or could you help us draft an agreement, etc. Could you help us negotiate this? So I would offer services, legal services on the side, apart from teaching and research. Of course, now I no longer have the time to do that, primarily because I've taken on a lot of administrative work at the OPG Global University. But there seem to be considerable number of opportunities for legal academics to engage, like you said, in policy work, in advisory work, in teaching in other places, and so on and so forth. At the end of the day, the challenge over here is how disciplined are you, right? So in a standard corporate law firm, you're expected to work 60 hours a week, right? So 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 5 days a week, that's your standard work day, right? When I shifted here, the executive officer for the law school called me up and said, sir, just to let you know, you're teaching 2 sections of property law, you'll be teaching for 10 hours a week. I was like, what? 10 hours a week? That's it? So then I figured, okay, so 10 hours a week, and maybe I'll take some time to prepare the classes and some time to do the assessments, meet with students. That's another 20 hours at best. That's 30 hours a week. What am I going to do with the other 30 hours? Right? So now, if you are disciplined enough, you can adequately manage your time in devoting whatever time you have as a legal academic to other ventures or avenues that could be fulfilling in terms of either research, or it could be fulfilling in terms of, let's say, financially, or just spend time with family. But that again depends upon your
intention and what drives you. Right. So there are of course many successful academicians abroad, more than in India, that we see, who have built organizations, enterprises, think tanks, have played major roles in for that matter government policy. And in fact, let's take an example of Raghuram Rajan. He's a professor of economics, and he has been acting as central central banker. And so it is a common thing that very successful academicians do engage in other things, and perhaps it's a great idea, like to enrich yourself as an academician, make a name, etc.
And you're also keeping abreast of developments that are happening on a daily basis.
And being relevant, I think that is a big issue, that a lot of times academicians are not relevant to what is going on. And this is a whole criticism of academia that we have today, that, and would like to know your comments about that a lot of things that is happening in academia are not relevant to the real world. For example, academic journals, there's a criticism of academic journals that nobody reads these journals. Like, there's some survey that showed that only 8 people read a journal article
that's true,
published, and on an average, and that is that we're talking about the top journals, and there are journals that maybe nobody is reading at all. And then academic publishing sometimes is completely irrelevant. It's just about publishing for the sake of publishing, and for the sake of maybe getting certain emoluments. So all this is happening. So if you talk about how can academicians be really relevant, make an impact, play a bigger role, if you can give us some examples you can think of, and some pathway if you can show, because I think if to attract people into this. Interestingly, I just want to give a little bit of background to this. We see a lot of people these days who are interested in teaching. Okay, like lawyers, young lawyers, they want to go into teaching. Law students who are saying that I want to get into academia right from the beginning, and that's happening. It was not there in our times when we graduated, but this is happening now. 2 reasons. One is that there are good pay scales according to UGC, etc. So there is a comfortable paycheck, if not a very, it's not like it's all rosy for the litigators and the law firm, except for a few people. So of course, if you are a UGC NET qualified law teacher, you get a decent paycheck. But beyond that, they are not clear that, okay, what after that? What can we aim for beyond that, right? Can we do something more than just coming and going and teaching in a private college? And let's face it, that most of the colleges today are private colleges, especially law colleges. Out of 1,500, there may be at least at max 100 of them are government colleges. Everybody else is a private college. So there are pressures of private college where, apart from teaching, you're doing a lot of administrative work, and a lot of them are quite hard pressed for time. And they want that, okay, what is the next step for me? Now that I am an academician, I'm in academia, what do I do to get to the next step? Many of them want to go abroad, research, many of them want to write, many of them want to be relevant. So if there's a young academician looking for relevance, what could be the pathway for them? Or if somebody is considering even getting into legal academia, how should they think of it? Like where should they aim at?
Right. First of all, teaching is not, I wouldn't say teaching is a profession or a vocation. It's, I think it's far deeper than that. It's a calling that, it comes from within, that I want to, teach. I want to enlighten the minds of others, right? I want to be somebody who expands horizons of other people, right? But for those of us who are, looking to get into academia or are already in academia, maybe young academicians who are listening to this or seeing this. So what's the end game, right? That's the question. Where does it end?
Right.
One of two ends.
No, not end game, but at least like something to aim at, for at least
something to aspire for. Okay, so I can see two aspirations, two sets of aspirations. One set is that of, let's say, Professor B.S. Chimney. Okay? So Professor B.S. Chimney was he around when you graduated?
Yeah.
So he was your graduating vice chancellor as well, right?
No, not graduating. That was MP Singh. But by the time when I was in my second year, I think he left. Yeah.
All right. So we've been both taught by Professor MP Singh, right, at NUJS. Right. So Professor MP Singh has now joined the Jindal Global Law School as a full-time professor, and I had the opportunity of meeting him after many years. Now, right. Professor B.S. Chimney as well is of course joining us, and I saw him, and all he wants to do is read and write, but anything that comes out of Professor B.S. Chimney is considered to be of high value, and he's created that value for himself by years and years of concentrated work in the third world approach to international law, right? Which is basically the theory that all of international law has been created by the global north, and therefore it favors the global north, and therefore we need a fresh look at international law from the third world perspective. Now, Professor Chimney is known for this, right? And now that could be an inspiration. That could be something to aspire to be, right? A John Nash, Professor Chimney, somebody who's broken new ground in terms of human knowledge, and something that has created ripples. Now, how does one do this? Research, right? Now, I have a simple method of doing research. I don't research much, I don't publish much. But every time I do, or every time I embark on a new research project, I ensure that the research project satisfies what I called the patent test. Now, those of us who have done intellectual property law, they will know that it has to have novelty, it has to have an inventive step, and it has to have utility. Now, this is where the question of relevance comes in. Now, you could write a brilliant piece on Hart, right, and his philosophy. Is it going to be relevant to solve constitutional debates or constitutional crises? If not, is it useful? It's not, right? So if you're researching something, and this goes out to anybody who's researching anything, whether you're researching for a term paper, a dissertation, a thesis, you're writing a paper to be published, ask yourself, who is going to read this and how will it change their lives? If you can't answer those questions, my recommendation is move on to something else.
I think just hearing you, I think somebody has to come up with a certification for this, that when there's an academic paper in law,
I did not.
There has to be patent test has to be met, and if it is met, we will issue a certificate. I think that will be very important.
No, but that's one of the ways that academics can stay relevant, and
that's very true. Yeah, I think I genuinely mean this. I'm not only joking. I'm only half joking that there should be, when academics are rewarded for publishing, there should be these tests that they're tested upon.
So that's one way of getting academics down from their ivory tower. Something that academics have always been accused of, that you write and think about things that have no relevance to the common man. right?
Right.
I mean, well, let's face it, every scientific discovery or most scientific discoveries have come out of universities, right? You look at even now, there are researchers at not only at pharmaceutical companies, but also medical labs at Harvard, Oxford. Every medical school in the world is now looking for a cure to the coronavirus, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So there you go.
And of course, there is certain research which is important, but cannot be, say, for example, patented. So there's like research on astrophysics or like, the black hole theory cannot be
Sure,
like.
sure. But is the black hole theory going to be, is it relevant to the
It is
common man
relevant.
now? No.
No.
Will it, is there a possibility that it'll be relevant to the common man, let's say 2000 years down the line, perhaps, when we figure out space travel, right? But my point is this, that if you want to get ahead in terms of research, make sure your research is relevant, right?
Absolutely, yeah. There has to be some intrinsic value to it. And right now, a lot of research in Indian academia, legal academia, I don't know about the rest. It is done only for the sake of getting grades from UGC, which is a very sad.
One prime example would be of Professor Umakant. Now, Professor Umakant writes on primarily corporate law and corporate governance, but whatever he writes on, it has some relevance to the corporate law industry, right?
Right. People follow it and read it and look forward to it.
I'm assuming everybody who's watching this is a follower of his blog as well. So there you go.
Okay, great. So fantastic. So so this is something to aim at, to be relevant and to make an impact.
The other thing to aim at is to become a good administrator. Now, Professor Madhav Menon, who I had the fortune of being taught by, he was a fantastic administrator, and he changed the the landscape of the Indian legal education system.
Right, building institutions basically.
Building institutions, yeah.
But setting standards, building institutions.
But that again, for a legal academic, that might be a little difficult because, let's face it, we're not trained in building or managing institutions. We're trained in figuring out whether the institution adheres to a particular structure or not. But to create one, that takes a lot of talent.
Right. So if you can talk a little about, if somebody wants, like, let's get into like, I think we have answered the why question quite a bit extensively. Let's get into how. And the question is that if somebody wants to be a very successful academician, so there is a big difference. Like, Manmohan Singh had said once, there are like, the islands of excellence and sea of mediocrity. That is very true. I have personally seen good teachers languishing in environments in colleges where they really have no opportunity to contribute, or they want to do something but they're not allowed to do it. And it's a very there's a mushrooming of law schools that have happened, and quality standards, while the BCI is setting some quality standards, we're not sure how they're doing it, because the end result is not always pleasant. So given that scenario, like, of course, people don't want to end up in the wrong colleges, wrong universities, where they wouldn't find the conducive environment. So there is this huge, I think, a competition, just like getting into a big law firm and a good law firm, and not getting into it and trying to make it on your own, or trying to work with the local lawyers. It's very different in terms of how much you get paid, how much opportunity you get, how much training you get, how much exposure you get to doing good stuff. And of course, so if somebody wants to get into the good side of the Indian academia and turn up in a good place, and also maybe work abroad, etc. And if their goal is to make a huge impact and break new ground of human knowledge or build great institutions, I'm sure that they have to find the right places. So how do you prepare yourself for that? What is the career trajectory like? How hard it is, or easy it is to actually make it in the right part of the Indian?
So typically, the career trajectory will start just after your law school would end. Now, this is not my career trajectory. I followed a different one, but typically, students who want to become legal academics, they would start immediately after law school. Or actually,
but that's not necessary, right? It may be a good idea to practice for a few years. And
I would say it's a fantastic idea to practice beforehand, right? Get a few years of practice under your belt. But of course, if your mind is made up on teaching, then you might as well start an LLM program at some point in time. And LLM is, of course, a basic requirement, and there are a few other statutory requirements that you will have to fulfill, such as the NET qualification. Perhaps even for some universities, they will require a PhD. Now, once you've gone through, let's say, a bit of practice and maybe an advanced or maybe a couple of advanced degrees in law, at that point of time, you could start appearing for job interviews, or you could start applying to law schools across India or across the world. Typically, law schools will hire around just before the new batch begins, the new session begins, right? So if a law school is starting their new session in, let's say, July or let's say August, then expect a round of hiring in March, April, May, right? And so those are the good times to actually look out for job opportunities in various law schools, whether in India or elsewhere. Of course, different countries have different mechanisms, and I'm just focusing on India right now. Once you actually get into, a law school and you've been given a faculty position. Now, these faculty positions could vary in terms of their nomenclature, right? So some places you could be called a research associate, some places you'd be called a lecturer, some places you'd be called a research fellow. But all of these sort of names or designations are sort of right at the fresher level, right? Now, how do you get from there to being a full professor? Now, typically, a full professorship comes typically 12 to 14 years post PhD, right? So it's a long, long way away. Of course, you can fast track.
Unless you figure out, you fast track it by joining, upcoming universities where they really want you, etc. Right?
Well, you could fast track it by joining an institution of evidence, which is what I have done, thankfully.
Sure.
But so I don't have a PhD, but whatever. It's in the pipeline at some point in time. I'll have to do it at some point in time. But from that moment on, you have two roles to play. One is you got to go into your class and teach, and you have to be prepared for each and every class that you take. The second is keep researching, right? Focus on yourself, focus on your research. Here's a tip. Here's a tip I give all the younger academics who join the Jindal Global Law School every year. Devote a couple of hours to writing 500 words a day.
Fantastic.
500 words a day. That's it. Irrespective of whether you have class, you have a party, you have a staff meeting, you have invigilation, doesn't matter. 500 words a day, right? What does that mean? A standard journal article, right? Let's say in the United States, let's say Harvard Law Review. Standard journal article is, let's say 30,000 words. 500 words a day means you have a journal length article in 2 months. It takes 2 months, right? And you continue this over a period of a year, you have 6 journal articles.
Sure.
Of course, to write those 500 words, you need to have that space, that mental space. You need to be able to read, devote yourself to doing research on whatever you're doing research on, right? In terms of trajectory, if that works out, in a couple of years, maybe 5-7 years, you'll be acknowledged as a leader in the field, right? So, for example, I've been writing on CSR and mergers and acquisitions over the last 5-7 years. I'm now getting requests for clarifications on certain matters, not just from lawyers, but from, let's say, sustainability officers at companies, right? So that's where the industry connect automatically happens.
And how important is blogging for academicians? Because although you don't get those points, but
I think it's extremely important. In fact, I don't think enough academics leverage their social media presence also. So, for example, every time I publish something, it'll be up on my Facebook, on my LinkedIn, on my Twitter, right? Not on Instagram. I don't consider Instagram to be a serious academic platform, right? But LinkedIn too, definitely, right? And I think more academics ought to be doing it. A lot of academics, at least the ones that I know, are doing it. Every time you publish an op-ed piece, every time you publish even, let's say, a blog piece, right? So if I've written for, let's say, the Oxford Business Law blog, a link to that will be on my LinkedIn, it will be on my Facebook. What that does is it creates a buzz around whatever you've written, and hopefully somebody will pick it up. Somebody will find it useful.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Any professor that I have seen, or even a very young academician that I have noticed, that they have been regularly writing and not only publishing in journals. I'm not sure if they publish journals. If they have been writing regularly on blogs and newspapers, and they have got tremendous exposure exposure from it, and the trajectory is altogether different, right? So anybody who I do interact with a lot of academicians from colleges where they say I'm not getting the right opportunity, etc. I keep saying that where are you writing? Where are you publishing? Like, are you writing articles? I'll help you to get it published in some blogs, in some newspapers. If you write on the right topics, they will publish. So if you do that, I think, and focus on one area. Can you talk about that, about specialization? How specializing on emerging areas, emerging laws, emerging technologies, or emerging problems is important for academicians? You can talk a little on that.
Well, okay. So in terms of emerging areas for legal academics to write on, I should disclose in advance, Ramanuj, that I don't think writing in emerging areas of law ought to be the goal.
Sure.
Right? Just because something is popular doesn't mean that you should be forced.
Yeah, but like you said, breaking new ground of knowledge, right? So it's something that I'm forgetting, like very famous scientists say that you need to work at the bleeding edge of the technology or science or any law, right? So basically there are things where human knowledge is still not developed, and it's just by attacking those problems you have a higher chance of doing something meaningful and contributing.
Sure. And there are so many problems that we haven't found solutions to yet, right? For example, off the top of my head, we still can't reconcile class disparity with equal opportunity, right? We can't do that yet. We haven't been able to figure that out yet, whether in terms of philosophy, law, economics, political science. We haven't been able to figure out.
But I'm just saying that for a young person to come up with a solution to that versus like being able to come up with a drone regulation, how it needs to change in India, where the chances of success is higher for that person.
Right. No, but so I would say that there are so many problems that need solving. Figure out which problem you want to solve. Figure out which problem appeals to you the most. Because the more connected you are to your research, chances are you'll do a better job.
Correct.
So those of us who, let's say, who are practicing right now, there are some matters that you enjoyed doing. And you probably did a better job at those matters than others that you didn't enjoy so much. Why is that? Simply because you like
that. Right. So you connect with that subject. But is it important to keep working on a narrow area for a long period of time for an academician, or is it okay to keep trying out different things?
Well,
be serious, committed to one area.
Right. So I would say, to begin with, explore all opportunities that are available to you. Right. For example, in the initial years, first couple of years, I dabbled with not just corporate social responsibility, but also religion and law. I dabbled with caste issues, right? But then I got focused on what I thought was my core, the actual core stuff that I know. So it's okay to be broad-based when you're younger, but as you grow on, you will have to focus in one super specialization, lest you lose out on the aspiration of being, let's say, a Professor Chimney. Now let's take Professor Chimney's example. He's known for his approach to international law. John Nash is known for his approach to, let's say, game theory, right? They're not known for their wide variety of things that they've written, right?
Right.
Think of any scientist or any academic that you can name. They've always been known for some particular contribution to humanity, which is extraordinarily, specific or specialized.
Got it. So I think, we have covered quite a bit of ground. There's a lot of questions. We'll better start taking those questions. Yeah. So let me just go to YouTube first and see what's there. And then if you have any questions, you can raise your hand. We'll shortly take those. So there's a lot of questions. Some are not relevant. How important is it to qualify NET to teach in a private college?
Well, that depends upon the private college. A lot of private colleges, private law schools don't require the NET. For example, OP Jindal does not require the NET to start teaching. But for a government college, you'll definitely need to clear the NET.
Right.
But it depends upon the private college, right? Some don't.
Yeah. And also, I think if you don't qualify NET, you're likely to get paid much less.
Yes, that's true. That is true.
There's a question on how to clear UGC NET in law. So that's a big question. I think that'll take a long time.
Study harder would be my response.
Okay. We'll do a session on this sometimes, Joy, soon. What are the perks of doing LLM and PhD in law? Does LLM help in promotion in being a senior advocate or judge?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Being a senior advocate or a judge, I think it depends upon your face time in court.
Yeah.
Number of years of experience at court. Right. And your skills, of course.
Correct. Let's see some other questions. Most questions are not directly relevant to the sessions. I'm not taking them. These are all a bunch of questions about judiciary exam for some reason.
Maybe you should do another couple of webinars on judiciary.
Yeah. Is LLM compulsory for being a law academician?
Yes. Most or every law school that I have ever come across, whether it's in India or abroad, all of them expect a minimum of an LLM, at least for now. Now, there are occasions where certain American law schools will accept JDs, or let's put it another way, there are certain legal academics in the United States who only have a JD, the equivalent of our LLB, right? But that too, mind you, is a second degree after their undergraduate in the United States. But increasingly what I'm seeing in terms of the United States and other countries across the world is that an LLM is the bare minimum, right? And sometimes nowadays I'm seeing that even without a PhD, it's very, very difficult to get a faculty position, particularly post 2008, 2009. It's increasingly difficult to get a faculty position even without a PhD.
Right, and it may be possible for a lot of lawyers to teach on a part-time basis. They can get an opportunity to teach some classes. I mean, yes, not as a faculty member, but as an adjunct faculty.
As an adjunct faculty, yeah.
Right, so that is possible, right?
But so mind you, the shift from industry to academia, particularly on like a weekly basis, that takes some getting used to.
Yeah, but yeah, there are people who are managing to do it, especially in times of doing it all online. So you might explain. So okay, there are other questions. Let me quickly take. There's a very interesting question that I have seen. It was about. It's about should law teachers be allowed, the full-time law teachers be allowed to practice part-time or not? What are your thoughts on this?
This is a very old debate. Yeah. When full-time politicians are allowed to practice law, why shouldn't full-time academics? Mm-hmm. Between a politician and a legal academic, who do you think is more connected to the law at any point of time? And of course, there has been considerable debate on this. I believe the Bar Council of India still has not addressed this issue. But I believe that if the Bar Council is scared that either legal education will suffer or the practice of law will suffer, if we allow legal academics to practice law, then why can't the same be placed for politicians, right? I would say that in a little more liberalized market, let the lawyer or the legal academic decide.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Absolutely.
And in the other side of that coin is, if you can't allow legal academics who are employed in a university to practice law, then on what basis are you allowing practitioners to do adjunct courses?
Right.
Right.
Okay. So there's a question on, I think it's an important question. What about is it important that you do your LLM from a big foreign university to, or a famous foreign university? Or is it okay to do an LLM from India? Of course, what is the pros and cons, basically?
Sure. Now this question is slightly reminiscent of the white man's burden, that we consider foreign universities to be better than...
For good reasons also in a lot of situations.
Sorry?
For good reasons in a lot of situations.
Yeah, absolutely. For good reasons. I agree. And I can say that objectively, perhaps, the quality of education that we receive in certain foreign universities, not all, certain foreign universities, is objectively of a higher quality. Now, if I were to ask any one of our viewers right now, name the top 5 law schools in the world, chances are they'll name Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, Stanford, Yale, right? Maybe Columbia, maybe NYU, maybe Duke, right?
Stanford. But that's okay. So top 5-10 people will agree more or less.
Exactly. Right? But why is everybody saying the same? Because perception matters. Right. And how did these law schools bring up that perception? Because they've been there for a good many number of years, hundreds of years, and they've developed an aura amongst themselves. Now, when you go abroad and you do an LLM from, let's say, Harvard, when you come back to India, or you're going to finish your LLM from Harvard, you're carrying that Harvard tag, right? Is that going to make you better off compared to somebody who did an LLM from, let's say, Jindal? Of course it does, right? And objectively, I can say that Harvard Law School is far better than Jindal Global Law School or any of our national law schools in the country, right? Okay. So in terms of choosing between going to a foreign law school to do an LLM or a PhD, or staying back in an Indian law school, what matters is what is the public perception, or what is the perception amongst people in terms of how is that law school doing, right? Is it a good law school? Is it not a good law school? So as a result, figure out how is that law school in terms of perception. I'll give you another example. We've all heard of Harvard, Oxford, Cambridge, etc. Right? What if you've gotten an offer to do an LLM from the University of East Wollongong in Australia? Nobody's heard of East Wollongong. Should you be going there? Ideally not, especially if you've got an offer from NLS Bangalore also. More people in India will know NLS Bangalore than the University of East Wollongong. I don't even know if it exists. I just made it up right now.
Right.
The point is, if you're doing an LLM, figure out which brand name has more value.
Correct. So I think that the brand value matters, and it's a filtration process that academia looks at. So definitely you should look at it as well. And if you can get an LLM from a good university, it will make a big difference.
Absolutely. And of course, if you're going abroad, I would recommend from an admissions point of view, and I handle admissions for JGU. From an admissions point of view, don't go abroad right now. Embassies are closed. I don't know when the next round of visas will be given. So right now, going abroad is a bad idea.
People are allowing you to attend classes online.
Yes, of course.
If that helps in you.
That helps.
So, okay. So, there's a question there's a lot of questions. Let me see which ones I'm going to quickly take. Do you have some extra time? Can you go through some?
I actually have another webinar at 4 o'clock, but I have some time right now.
A few minutes, okay.
Yeah.
So let's take up a few questions. I was wondering if applying to a Canadian university for PhD is a good idea. Is there any scope for internationally trained lawyer outside India who wishes to obtain PhD in a particular country? How do I develop my resume for that?
All right. So I'm looking at the same question by Pritish. I think getting a PhD from a Canadian university, again, depending upon which university in Canada and how they're ranked, what is their research level, etc. Because at the PhD level, what you should be looking for is universities or law schools with a high standard of research, high impact research, right? So if you are doing a PhD, if you embark on a PhD from a different country, let's say Canada for in your case, then I would consider the PhD to be a stepping stone as a legal academic in different countries as well. Right? So if you've got a PhD from a foreign country, then you've got some legitimacy in terms of teaching their laws in their country. So right now, what do we have? We are all Indian qualified lawyers. Some of us have got LLMs from India, some of us have got LLMs from abroad, and we might have a dual qualification, right? But the moment you have that dual qualification, an LLM from outside of India, you can now show to, whoever's wanting to hire you, you can now show to them that I am capable of teaching your jurisdiction's laws as well, right? Mm-hmm. So in terms of a stepping stone as an internationally trained lawyer, Canada is a good example. Canada's got fantastic law schools, Osgoode Hall, McGill University, Toronto, all of them are fantastic. University of British Columbia, all of them are fantastic universities and I've interacted with a number of people from those universities. I think Canada is a great place to go, except again, like I mentioned earlier, right now may not be the best time.
Right. There are a bunch of questions. There's somebody who has studied in England and is practicing in Cambridge, and what would be a prospect of shifting to India? Baiju.
Okay, Baiju Thitala. Okay, you're an Indian, studied in England, practicing in Cambridge. Wow, wonderful. So if you have, if you're planning to shift to teach in India, we're hoping that you have an LLM degree at least. For most universities that that we've talked about earlier, you will require an NET, or perhaps if you don't want to do the NET, then wait for a few years and do your PhD. But of course, if you're planning to shift and practice here in India, then I believe that they'll have to take the qualified lawyers transfer test or the equivalents of it to practice in India. But for legal academics, it's either the NET, or for those universities or colleges that don't require the NET, you could come in, as a direct faculty, as a direct recruit.
Okay. There's a question from SB. This is about what are the commonly examples of commonly experienced pressure points in academia, like where people feel dissatisfaction. He's asking.
Well, I can tell you some of the dissatisfactions that I have had in the past. Mm-hmm. Primarily, it's to be frustrated with, and I know there are many law students that are watching this, and I'm very, very sorry, but sometimes law students can get very, very frustrating, right? Yeah. Primarily, if you are projecting yourself to be professional, to be on time, to land up in a classroom at the appointed hour, to grade their assessments or assignments within a particular period of time, to deliver on what you promised, that same level of professionalism we should start expecting from our law students. One of the biggest pain points I have is dealing with my law students as to, sir, can we get an extension? Sir, can you mark us leniently? No, absolutely not. So I went through the list of people who had registered or are attending this. Some of them, I have some of my own students here.
Okay.
Right? Mm-hmm. And they will know this, that no, there are certain things you can't ask for. You shouldn't be asking for. Right? So in terms of dissatisfaction, it's like, if I am available, if I make myself available to turn up to class, well prepared, well read, and ready for that discussion, why can't you? And that to me is one of the biggest challenges of how do I get students to act like professionals and stop acting like students.
Right. That's a big problem, I'm sure. There's a question on, I want to teach in JGLS someday. Is it mandatory to do an LLM from abroad, or as all teachers in JGLS have one or more foreign degrees?
Okay, so
if you want to answer, if you don't want
to. No, I'm happy to answer this as well. I've been part of this institution and it's building for quite a few years. I'm happy to answer this question. We would prefer lawyers or legal academics who have had some exposure abroad, right? In the sense that either they've got an academic qualification, whether an LLB or a PhD, or in some cases even a JD or a BCL, a first degree in law outside of India. Either that or some work experience outside of India. Now that is a preference, but it is not an eligibility criteria. If you go through the list of faculty members that we have at the Jindal Global Law School, there are some faculty members who have had only Indian qualifications. Of course, I will say this with a disclaimer that such faculty members are very few and far in between, right? So the criteria basically is that okay, so if I'm looking at another. So Mansur Darshan's question. What are the criteria JGLS looks at while hiring fresher faculty members? We look at your potential to teach, your potential to do research. So they go through a fairly rigorous process of having to teach a mock class in front of a panel of fairly experienced senior legal academics, and who will then figure out, is this person good enough to be able to teach at JGLS? Right?
Great. So there's a question from Niharika. She's asking, Your thoughts on growing trend of enrolling oneself in a PhD program early on in career, immediately after LLM, versus later PhD step in career trajectory in context of Indian legal academia.
Right. Now, I would, from my personal experience, I would recommend against doing a PhD or an LLM early. If you are trying to become, if your aspiration is to be a legal academic, as Ramanuj and I, we have discussed earlier in this webinar, it makes sense to have some real world experience, which you can then translate into classroom lectures or classroom discussions. But if we straight away get into an LLM or a PhD early on, what you're doing is you're removing yourself from the opportunity to engage in real world practice. Now, academics, well, the industry has lamented across the ages that, the actual knowledge that you get is only after you start practicing, and all the knowledge that you get in law schools is only bookish. I take very strong offense to this as of now, because I treat my own students as if they were associates in my law firm, right? And I take them through whatever, a clinical course on mergers and acquisitions, etc. But if you haven't experienced, let's say private practice, how do you know how the law is going to get applied? So my recommendation, my advice would be practice for a few years, then go off for your PhD, right? The advantage is that you will be able to translate whatever you learned in practice into classroom discussions. That this is the law, this is how it's actually applied. And come up with hypothetical situations based on your own life, based on your own experiences, right?
There's an interesting question, and I also want to know the answer to this question because I face this sometimes. I am an LLM with second class with 53% through distance education. Basically, I've got LLM through distance education. May I be eligible to register for doctoral program?
For what program?
Doctoral program. Like, can I do PhD? Can I do PhD after this?
Well, again, it depends upon a number of factors. Some universities do not accept online or distance education programs. And I'm talking about across the world, not just in India, right? But a large number of universities do. Now,
like National Law School Bangalore does, for example.
National Law School Bangalore does. I mean, they have a distance learning program. I'm quite certain they have to. Yeah. So by the way, JGLS is starting an online LLM in corporate and financial law. Our first foray into distance learning education, and we're doing it in partnership with Upgrad. We'll do a formal launch later on, but this is just, to let you know. But eligibility or admission into a doctoral program typically will be based upon a number of factors, including your basic eligibility criteria. Have you completed a master's degree? Second, have you shown some promise of being able to do research? So I think for most doctoral programs, what they're looking for, and from the admissions perspective, is that you may not have published, but have you shown the potential to publish? Have you shown the potential to be able to work on a problem for, let's say, 3, 4, maybe even 5 years without losing track of what your goal is? Now, doctoral studies can be excruciatingly lonely, because basically you're cooped up with nothing but your books and your notes and your thoughts by yourself most of the time. On occasion, once in a month, once in 2 months, you might just meet your guide and mentor who will have a conversation with you on your problem. Nobody else is actually interested in the thesis that you're writing. So it becomes extremely lonely as a doctoral candidate, right? And it comes as no surprise that a lot of doctoral candidates drop out. So if you were to ask me about doctoral studies, whether to do it early or later, I would say later, because by that time you've created or you've thought of a problem that you really think needs solving. And therefore you're more likely to engage with that problem for a longer period of time and have that additional rigor that a doctoral program requires.
Got it. Okay. So, okay, I think we are done with most of the questions. There's one question is that last question we're going to take is, whenever you as a teacher are frustrated, how do you place enough conviction in your career choice to keep yourself motivated? By Devanshu.
Yeah, that's a good question, Devanshu. Thank you very much for asking that. I have just one motivation, right? The look on my students' faces when they finally get it. right? So for example, I might spend half an hour, 45 minutes, maybe even an hour, depending upon the cohort of students, trying to explain preemptive rights. Let's say the right of first offer. It's a fairly complicated clause that requires multiple back and forth of communication, right? For those of us who've drafted these clauses and argued these clauses, it's easy. But for a law student who's facing this kind of a clause for the first time in a contract, maybe in fourth year, it doesn't come automatically. But when it does, I kid you not, I see it every time. There is this look of realization, a euphemism. And that look is evident. They may not, the law student may not think it's there, but it is, right? I can see it. That is what drives me, irrespective of how frustrated I can get. That somebody finally got it, right? I have been able to create some spark in somebody's brain. Great. And that to me is worth more than any paycheck, any number of publications, any number of Nobel Prizes, right? And any number of clients. That look of realization. That's all that matters. And that's how I keep myself motivated.
If people have further questions from me, because there are a lot of questions and I see questions pouring in, even now on both on YouTube and on here. Is there a chance that they can get in touch with you?
Yes, they can. I'm available on all the standard
LinkedIn, Twitter.
I'm most likely to respond on LinkedIn. Yeah. Least likely to respond on Instagram and on Facebook. Of course, if anybody would prefer a more formal engagement or more formal sort of communication with me, my email address is abmajumdar@jgu.edu.in. Let me see if I can send a chat to everyone. I'm just going to put that up in the chat box. jgu.edu.in. So there you go. There you have my email address. And feel free to write to me at any point of time. Give me a few days to respond to you. We're smack bang in the middle of admission season and we're doing online classes as well. So my time is at, so yeah.
Perfect. So one other idea is that you can, there's a video of this discussion on YouTube. So you can put in your questions below in the comments, and at some point we'll share it with Arjun and ask him.
Or I'm happy to answer to those comments right then and there, as and when I see the video.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Thank you so much for making time and sharing your insight. I think it was a very good experience for all of us to get a sense of the profession of legal academicians. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Ramanuj. Thank you for doing this. I'm so glad that LawSikho is doing this, getting people aware of the different career options that are available to law students. I mean, back in the day, all we had was either corporate law or litigation. Now there seems to be so many other valid options that we can use. And hats off to you and your team for doing this. And I hope you guys do more and more webinars.
Great. We'll keep doing that. Thank you so much and hope to have you back another time. Thank you.
Anytime soon. Thanks.
Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, Ramanuj. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.